let's do that before it gets too interesting. All right, it's going up. So, hey, everybody, welcome to the Sustainiacs. I'm Michael Vincent. I'm always a Sustainiac, and so is Sam Baker. But I just discovered him, so now we're buddies, and we're talking about all kinds of important stuff like Sasquatch, skunk apes, though, right?
Skunk apes.
You're in skunk ape. You're in skunk ape territory at UCF. No,
we are. But I haven't seen him yet.
Oh, yeah, actually, you're just north, right? Because that's like a Everglades thing, right?
Yeah, it's kind of Everglades, kind of like a coastal thing. I don't know. I'm not very well versed on my skunk ape lore, but
are you from Florida?
I am. I'm seventh generation Floridian.
Get out of it. There's no such thing, dude.
You're
like the one.
I know. I look at everyone else as like a newcomer. I'm like, what are you guys doing here?
So like Ponce de Leon is like your great grandfather or something.
No, but my last name is Baker, and there's a county in North Florida called Baker County, and it's named after one of my great grandfathers. Yep.
All right, so you're from northern Florida?
Yeah, well, kind of everyone who's, been in Florida for a while for the most part is, St. Augustine is North Florida, Jacksonville's North Florida. So unless you're a pirate.
Well, so St. Augustine, isn't St. Augustine like the oldest continuously inhabited city in the United States?
Theoretically, it's at least the oldest continuously inhabited European city. Because you could argue, yeah. Like Mexico City used to be Tenochtitlan, which is capital of the Aztec Empire.
All right. So
maybe. It's cool though because it's in Florida. So
listen. When you're out of college in 30 years, come and talk to me. It'll be St. Augustine because you'll forget all that other crap you learned. But yeah, dude. Listen, I'm a beer snob, and I you know what I mean. I love craft beer.
Yep.
I love craft beers. I don't put out any other beers, but why would you drink something that just makes you need to urinate? It doesn't do anything. But WriggleBrew caught my eye, dude. I was like, WriggleBrew? What the hell's WriggleBrew?
Is it a beer? No.
Is it a beer? Maybe, but most definitely not. As soon as you go there, it's like, nah.
It's clearly. And I get that question all the time. Is this a beer? Can I drink it? Do you guys make beer? No, we don't make beer. We make.
But could you drink it?
Well, theoretically you could. You wouldn't want to, but you can.
So wait a minute. You said you don't make worm poop. You process it, right?
That's true. So basically what we're doing.
How the hell are you making worm poop?
Well, you have worms. You're a bunch of worms, and you give them food and you wait.
Yeah. All right. That's an interesting process. Can you motivate a worm to produce faster? Or
yes, you can. In fact,
get out of town. All right, cool. This is going to be awesome. What is WriggleBrew first, dude? What the hell is?
What is WriggleBrew? It's a very good question. What WriggleBrew is it is a fertilizer. It's not a brew for drinking. It's a brew for your plants. It's a fertilizer we make by brewing earthworm manure, so earthworm poop, which is why we call it.
Brew it. So what, you ferment it or something?
Effectively, yeah. There's almost like a kind of fermentative process.
Like right there in your dorm room, or what?
I actually used to do it that way,
but your RA got a little pissed.
Seriously, yeah. So one time, we used to have a regular lab in my dorm, and I had some trouble with the RA, but the product or the project was originally just a research project at UCF, and me and a couple of my friends started it, and we started it because in Florida, we have a lot of what's called red tide, which is fertilizer runoff. So we have a lot of like housing developments. We have a lot of businesses that use fertilizers, all kinds of fertilizers, mostly nitrogen, phosphorus, and these run off. They flow through our soil. They destroy a lot of soil microbiology, but they also cause these huge algal blooms, which cause fish kills.
That's red tide. Tide. When you have red tide, that's what that feeds into. That's not the only cause of it, but it promotes the growth of it, right?
It's the one that's caused red tide to explosively grow, because you naturally get small red tides that come about because of you have a lot of leaves go out, or you have a lot of effluent matter, but really the big driver is fertilizer.
Yeah, if you just drop a couple million tons of nitrates, it's not a good idea.
Yeah, and see what happens. All the algae it's like crack for them. They just go crazy about it.
Oh yeah. Well, it happens like in my pool every year too, right? every spring I open it up and then I fertilize my lawn and go, gee, why is my pool like producing algae at an unbelievable rate.
Well, because they're plants, and it's fertilizer is great for plants, and it turns out it's great for algae too. And for example, in Florida, we have a lake here called Lake Apopka. If you look at Lake Apopka on Google Maps,
I know where that is.
Yeah, it is bright green. It's like turquoise. And it's because it's surrounded almost on all sides by all these nurseries, and they're just dumping through the soil all this fertilizer into it. Lake Apopka is a dead zone. There's basically no fish in that lake.
It can't be because the algae just drown them out, right?
Exactly. And so
they suffocate it.
Yeah, literally. They have the eutrophication, and it just leads to the massive death of all these fish. And so for me, I was out fishing with my grandpa one day, and we went to a spot near Lake Harney. It's another lake in Florida. If you're big into fishing, there's a little pond nearby there. That was like our spot. And that spot, all the fish were dead when I went there in summer 2019. And it was because of this runoff.
Same thing, the proliferation of the runoff. But okay, there's so much to talk about there. But back to WriggleBrew.
Yes,
you almost told us what it was, and then we went off on all kinds.
Well, no, this actually leads into it. So because I saw this fish kill, I went to my friend at UCF, my best friend Gabe, who's a biochem major, and I said, "Hey, is there something we can do about this? You know, is there a fertilizer alternative that could be produced so that, you know, because we have a 1.5 million jobs here in Florida relying on farming, something they could use that wouldn't cause these massive fish kills?"
Yeah.
And so I asked him, and he said, well, you know, earthworm poop is like a really good fertilizer. And there's people who farm earthworms just for this purpose, and it doesn't cause any runoff. And I said, okay, well, that's kind of interesting. And I said, could we try making some fertilizer out of it? And we did. And we ended up learning about worm tea, which is a fertilizer people make from earthworm manure, which is a liquid.
Okay, see that WriggleBrew and worm tea. This is... It's like I'm walking down that back aisle in Whole Foods or something.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like that, you know.
So hardcore, man. If you're hardcore, you can go in this room.
Yeah, exactly. Like if you're one of those like really granola munching kind of people, you know.
Yeah. If you're looking for insect protein and that type of thing,
that's a little beyond my pay grade. But
yeah, I get you.
I was like, you know, this seems like pretty straightforward. You get worms, you feed them food waste. You know, you feed them like manure, you feed them like old tomatoes, like stuff people throwing out at farms, because we got plenty of that. And then they poop out fertilizer. And you take that fertilizer and you can give that to farms.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. It's a fantastic. So all right. So let's stay on the product for a minute.
Right, of course.
Benefits to it other than the fact that it sounds like it's really this natural thing that you're not going to be dumping a bunch of chemicals. You're going to do. I mean, they are still chemicals, but they're naturally produced chemicals, right? Because it's still nitrates, right? Is it not?
It's not really nitrates, actually. So that's one of the interesting things. So industrial fertilizers chemically. It was a brief little chemistry lesson for your audience.
Yeah, please. Yeah.
Industrial chemicals are typically very small molecules. So they're things like urea, ammonia. So they might have like 5-6 atoms in them. Very, very tiny, which means they're very mobile and they're very reactive. In nature, the kinds of molecules you encounter that plants are using as fertilizer, humus, the stuff that actually makes up topsoil, is usually made of things like humic acid, which have like on average like 185 atoms. So way, way bigger molecularly speaking.
Okay.
And that size makes all the difference in the world here. You know, size really matters.
I heard it. No, that's not true. Come on, dude. You just lost half the audience.
The ammonia molecules are really small. And because of that, they're really mobile. They move through the soil. They can run off very easily. They can rip apart cell walls because they interact very quickly chemically. But the humates, the things that you find normally, the things that are produced like by earthworms or by normal decomposer organisms, those are really big molecules. So they don't move through the soil very quickly. They're not very reactive. They react rather slowly. Plants have to kind of chemically take them apart in order to get what they need out of them. So they still have the same amount of nitrogen, but it's more locked up in larger things. You
gotcha. See? So does that mean they're less impactful?
Not precisely. It means that they're not as impactful on the same time frame. So if you dump a bunch of nitrogen on a plant, let's say ammonia, right?
You'll kill it.
You might, well, you kill it, yeah, if you use way too much. But if you use the recommended amount, what will end up happening
if you trip a little bit while you're fertilizing your lawn,
if you trip a little bit, you end up blowing up the plant.
You can kill some grass quickly.
Let's say you're one of those 5% of people who follows the instructions.
Okay.
And you actually do it right. What will happen is your plant's going to get all that nitrogen like that. And the plant is going to say, wow, I have tons of nutrients available. I mean, not literally, but it's going to essentially think that. And nitrogen gets pulled into the plant for production of protein and for the production of chlorophyll. So the plant starts getting really big, gets really green really fast.
Yeah.
But the plant uses nitrogen as an indicator to tell it that other things are in the soil too. And so it's kind of like a steroid. It picks up on all this nitrogen, but it's not actually getting any of the other nutrients that it needs.
Oh, wow. Really?
So the plant ends up coming out much weaker nutritionally. It ends up being more vulnerable to pests sometimes. The soil around it gets worse. So it's growth, but it's growth that's a very hollow kind of growth. And as a good example of this, if you look at the oranges we produce here in Florida, the oranges produced today are 6 times less nutritious in terms of things like vitamin C and vitamin D.
Get out of town. Really? Now, that's something I've never heard before.
Yeah.
That's wild.
Compared to those produced even in Florida back in 1963. If you go back to
and that's because of the proliferation of the use of chemical or man-made fertilizers.
Exactly, because these synthetic compounds, they cause enormous growth, but it's like giving someone a bunch of bread and nothing else. They're going to get really big, but they're not going to be very healthy. So the plants are getting functionally like rickets. And
wait a minute, no, we got rickets. Oranges are getting rickets.
I mean, basically, yeah, in a way, because they don't have, they're not getting the molybdenum they need, the selenium, the boron, the copper. They're not getting these other things. Those things they need in very small quantities, and you find them in healthy topsoil because earthworms and other organisms like them, they will take those compounds and they'll chemically enshroud them through a process called chelation into larger things like humic acid that they can actually eat. But when you dump nitrogen, you don't get any of that. You just get nitrogen.
You just get nitrogen. So why don't the fertilizer just incorporate all these other things into it as well?
Well, they're increasingly trying to do that, but it's really hard to balance them. And the other thing is, it's expensive, and one of the big things that fertilizer companies want to do is they want to make a really cheap, really easy to make thing like nitrogen, like ammonia, and just ship tankers full of it. And they don't really want to care that much about what it's doing to the soil on the other end, because if the farmer's soil is getting worse over time, they're going to buy more fertilizer.
Yeah, no, yeah, absolutely they are, and they're just going to keep depleting the nutrients faster and faster and
exactly.
faster.
It makes this negative feedback loop.
Yeah, it's just a negative downward spiral. Now, before there was composting, when I was a kid, there was my parents. We had our own rather large garden in our backyard and stuff. Then we also it was almost like crop sharing or whatever you want to do, but there was these big farms near our house that you could rent an acre and grow whatever you wanted on it, which was kind of cool. My dad loved to do that type of stuff. But he would introduce all our food scraps into the soil.
Yeah.
Which is kind of like what you're doing, but kind of not a scientific way of doing it, right? Because it was, the bugs and stuff will eat this and then it feeds the plants and it breaks down.
And that's exactly right. Yeah.
It was right. And it was better than just the fertilizers. And I think back then it's just the fertilizers weren't really that available, and not in mass quantities certainly not for private citizen use and stuff like that. I mean,
no. And that's the thing, naturally we don't find giant piles of nitrogen with plants growing out of them. That's not something you ever see.
Yeah. I've never witnessed it.
You do find plants that like lots of nitrogen, plants for example, legumes, beans actually produce nodules on their roots that bring in nitrogen producing bacteria because they want extra nitrogen, but they have a method for doing that. They've evolved that method over a very long time period.
So what's your background? Are you a chemist or are you a biochemist or whatever?
My background was chemistry, but I also studied economics as well.
Oh, well, that makes sense.
Because I wanted to start a business. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna do econ as well, so I can learn how business works.
So I can make a chemistry business.
Didn't really help me all that much, to be quite honest. I mean, a little bit. I learned a lot about industrial business, which is somewhat helpful.
Yeah, no, it's all helpful. It's really interesting. So, um, you have a farming background. I mean, why did you do this? What went? You know what? This is my mission in life because
I mean, it was pretty much what watching all those fish die. I mean, I was really shocked because, you know, like I said, I'm like a 7th generation Floridian. So I thought to myself, you know, I'm sitting here with my grandpa looking at all these dead fish. I'm like, if there's ever going to be like an 8th generation of my family, where are they going to go fishing? It's all going to be, you know, with all the housing development that's happening, everything's going to be dead. So
you have to go to Georgia.
Yeah, go to. Oh my God, no!
You don't want to. I mean, you don't want to do that.
No. So I went to Gabe, and for context, Gabe, my friend who's a biochemist, he and I have been friends since 8th grade. So we've been friends since middle school.
Gotcha.
And we went through the science fair together in high school. Like we were, you know, we're really, really close. And he's a really smart guy. And so I asked him about what to do, and he told me about the earthworms. And I thought, you know, if we have worms that we can feed garbage to, we can feed food waste to, and they poop out fertilizer, why aren't we doing that? I mean, it seems very obvious that, like, if we're shipping in tankers full of toxic compounds, you know, because a good amount of our fertilizer comes from abroad. If we're shipping that in from over the sea, why not just use the garbage we have here to make our own fertilizer that's not going to pollute? And so we ended up looking into it, and we ended up learning about worm tea and earthworm castings being brewed to make liquids. And we're like, why aren't farmers using that? You know, it turned out there were a bunch of challenges there. So the earthworm teas, the fertilizer made from worm poop, most of them go bad in 24 to 48 hours. They have a really short shelf life.
Oh, really?
Yes. And it's because... go ahead.
No, please.
Because they have bacteria in them from the worm's gut, you know, because it's effluent matter. So if you seal it up, you deprive it of oxygen, you get anaerobic compounds growing in it. And so I asked myself, I'm like, okay, well, that's bad, but that just seems like an engineering challenge. Like if you put your head together enough, you'll probably be able to find a way to solve that. So we ended up doing that for 3 years, from freshman year until almost senior year. We just spent all of our spare research time working on trying to make a shelf-stable, improved worm poop juice, which we ended up calling WriggleBrew.
which was that was very attractive to the chicks at the bars.
No, it was not. But you know, we persevered, and we faced a lot of these challenges. Eventually, we found a way to make it shelf stable. We ended up finding ways to improve it as well, add in a few extra things to it. We also ended up figuring out ways to make it on an industrial scale, to actually scale up the production process.
Yeah.
So we asked UCF for money, and we said, hey, can we have some cash to turn this into a real business? And they said no.
Yeah, okay.
But they did say that there was a competition at UCF for businesses, and they do this every year, called the Joust. And it's sort of like... which is a cool name, and it's sort of like...
Yeah, well, because you're the Knights, it makes sense.
Yeah, we're the Knights, so it's got to be night themed, you know.
Yep.
So we entered into the contest, and we made it to the semifinals, and we were going up against a bunch of competition. They had a business there with backing from Microsoft, and I think another one backing from Google. Like cool tech businesses. There was a drone business, and then there were the worm poop guys.
Yeah.
But we took
not quite as sexy, that's for sure.
That despite how, you know, like kind of, I mean, they literally introduced us that way on stage. The guy goes up, we go, we've got a tech business here, backed by Microsoft, run by some sophomores, and we got seniors doing worm poop. But we won the grand prize, and they gave us...
That's fantastic.
It was awesome. They gave us $15,000, which let us buy some real equipment. And so we started cranking out, you know, building as much of it as we could in my mom's garage and giving it away to farmers and to nurseries and gardeners. And they all loved it. And one thing led to another. Now we have our own little warehouse, and we're, you know, putting out a ton of this stuff to send all the way to like Missouri and Iowa and Maryland and stuff.
That is fantastic. So what is the difference that the farm is going to... So I get the environmental impact, right? I get it. So other than the environmental impact, which is important, I'm not downplaying that at all. What is the difference that the farmer is going to see?
Well, there's actually a lot of differences, and we're kind of discovering more of them as we go. But one of the big ones that we've seen is with these industrial fertilizers, you have to be very particular about when you use them. You can
Mm,
only use them, at a certain growth period, and you have to be very careful about the dosage.
mm.
With WriggleBrew, because it's a very gentle organic compound, you can use it on the seeds on day one, and you can use it
Ah,
on the plants very early. And because of that, it is improving the germination rate of the seeds. So when a farmer
you're
plant
not losing the production value of the commercial.
exactly
Wow.
when they're planting, let's say 100 seeds. I mean, obviously it's way more than that. Let's say 100.
Yeah. Okay.
30 out of those are never even going to sprout normally. Maybe
Okay.
even 40.
Really, 30 to 40% never make it.
And depending
Just
on what you're growing, it can be that bad. And so
wow.
you have a huge number that don't sprout, and you have to wait 2 weeks until you can start applying things like nitrogen. But with WriggleBrew, you can apply it like day one. And so you, instead of losing 30 or 40%, you lose like 10%,
Oh wow.
which
Okay.
is a huge increase. And the
It's
other
a
thing
six,
is,
it's a 66% reduction in lost seeds.
which is pretty nice. And that also translates into the number of seedlings. So one is germination, actually sprouting, but then the ones that sprout, how many of them survive? Well, there's another culling in that round. WriggleBrew helps
So
prevent that
I
as
mean,
well.
you're actually getting almost a 20. I mean, depending on what type of math you want to use, you could argue that you're increasing production by 20% just like that.
Essentially, yeah. I mean, and then
That's
you have to.
massive.
It
That's
is
massive.
massive, and it's all organic. So if you're an organic grower, this is a really good option, and it's
Mm.
affordable because we're making it out of worm poop. So it's very cheap. It's made here in the U.S. So in 2022, for example, we had this war in Ukraine begin, and the price of fertilizer went up 400% in some
Yeah,
cases.
I was going to say earlier when you said we're bringing in overseas, Ukraine is like a massive fertilizer
Enormous.
exporter. Yeah,
Huge. They something like 15 to 20% of the world market was wrapped up in just in that, and it
right.
gone like that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And of course Russia being sanctioned heavily, they're another huge producer. Um, and then a lot of the rest of it comes from a lot of other oil producing countries. When we had trouble in the Red Sea, kind of hard to get cargo like fertilizer around the world. So there's a lot of supply crunch that happens on that end.
So wait a
Uh,
minute. Is the fertilizer an oil byproduct?
yes, most of it is, at least the
Oh, is that
nitrogen.
right? Okay.
Yeah, so nitrogen fertilizers are a petrochemical product. They come about due to the Haber-Bosch process.
I don't think most people know that.
No, they don't. We call it petrochemical fertilizer a lot, but most people don't pick up on that. If you go to the store and you buy some pelletized nitrogen or some liquid nitrogen, no, I say liquid nitrogen, but some, liquid nitrogenous fertilizer, that's a petrochemical byproduct. That comes from natural gas
Mm,
mostly.
gotcha.
We get the methane out of that. We crack that with the air and the Haber-Bosch process. It consumes like 1% of all the world's electricity just to make that nitrogen fertilizer.
Yeah.
Very energy
Oh,
intensive.
really?
Yeah.
That's also massive.
Yeah.
So not only do you getting like the positive environmental impact from the application of it, right? Your intended use of the wriggle brew, but the reduction theoretically when you get to scale
Yeah.
of the production of commercial nitrogen would also be obviously a very positive impact
A huge, huge
as well.
impact. And not just for the US, but for lots of other countries. Because you look at countries like in Africa, particularly like Malawi, they have no domestic fertilizer production. None. So all of their fertilizer is imported. And so they have these cycles of famine because of the massive cost to produce their food. Uh,
Yeah.
Unlike American farms, they don't have the economies of scale to have buying power, so they're forced to kind of pay whatever price they can pay. And the fertilizers coming in from a very complex logistics chain. It's coming from an oil producing country. It's going to be processed in another place. Then it's going to go to a shipping depot. Then it's going to maybe be shipped to like let's say Kenya. Then from Kenya, it's got to travel inland all the way to Malawi. So
Yeah.
if you're a Malawian farmer, like a sharecropper, getting that fertilizer is going to take a long time. It's going to be very expensive, and it's going to be bad for your soil when it gets to you.
And it's going to eventually start producing over the years crops that are much less nutritious. And
Yes, and that
yeah,
actually is a big contributor to a huge number of child deaths around the world. So something like 4% of all child deaths can be linked just to the rice production in India and China, because they grow their rice with huge amounts of phosphorus fertilizer. That phosphorus fertilizer really destroys zinc in the soil. It bonds to it selectively, and it makes the soil basically bereft of zinc, which means when you get rice out of it, the rice has no zinc in it. And zinc is absolutely critical for children's immune systems. So these children are eating tons and tons of rice that 20 years ago or 40 years ago would be fine. But now, because it has no zinc in it, they are getting huge immune problems, and then they're dying from it.
Autoimmune deficiencies.
Yes. I couldn't remember the term, but they're doing nothing wrong. They're doing everything right, and their parents are doing everything that they did when they were kids, but now it doesn't work anymore.
Just doesn't work anymore.
And the same problem we may find eventually occurring here in the U.S. And
I've got a cat in here.
I've got one in here too.
I may actually have two in here. I'm not sure. It's a funny thing. I don't even have cats. Just kidding. Yeah, let me let this ding dong out. Hold on a second.
No problem.
Hey. Vámonos, muchacho.
Welcome back.
I probably won't even edit that out. I should have had you sing a song or something like that. And now intermission.
But yeah, so fertilizer, like I was saying, it has these enormously deleterious effects on a global scale, just beyond the environmental ones.
Wow. So, why not just introduce worms to the soil?
Well, that's a good option when you can. In fact, I'm actually wearing a shirt. So this is a cool worm farm guy. If you want to buy worms for your garden, he didn't pay me to do that. He gave me a shirt.
Uncle Jim's Worm
Farm. He's pretty neat.
That is fantastic.
So in a lot of cases, you can buy worms. People sell them online.
You go to the bait store and stuff like that.
Store. Yeah,
that wouldn't be the same thing though, would it?
Actually, it would be. A lot of times, it's the same kind of earthworms.
Really?
Yeah, because they're really easy to grow and raise if you know how to do it. So in fact, one of the worm farmers I work with, a guy named Teddy, for years, that's all he did is he just sold to bait shops till eventually he realized people would buy the castings from him, the manure, and the worms themselves for the garden. So, but in many cases, it's the same kind of worms.
Wow. So, but you're taking it and you're processing it so that it can be stored and then shipped to locations and then applied. Right?
Exactly.
That's the difference, right? As opposed to throwing out a bunch of worms and letting them do their thing. Right?
Yeah. So if let's say you're a corn farmer in Iowa or something.
Yeah.
You're not going to be able to buy a bunch of earthworms.
Not enough.
Not at the price that you want to pay. And then how are you going to apply them? Let's say you have 2,500 acres. How are you going to apply them? You're going to have blood meal, not worms. So, it's not really feasible. And the other issue is worms do not like sunlight. They like it to be dark. They're used to living in kind of under forest cover or under leaf litter. So if you have them out in a big field or even in like a suburban lawn, they don't do very well in that environment at all. They get baked to death.
Yeah, I've seen them nice and crispy on the sidewalk after, it rains and then the sun comes out. Right?
Yeah. And the reason they do that is because worms don't really have eyes. They don't have any kind of navigational equipment, so to speak. So when it rains, they try and move upwards in order to prevent themselves from drowning. And as they do that, they end up finding themselves on the concrete, and they can't burrow in concrete, and they can't see where they're going, so they end up stuck on it. And then when the sun comes out, they just get destroyed.
Yeah, they get destroyed.
And it's really tragic, and we've been having a decline. It's sad. We've had a decline in earthworm populations in America because we got so many housing developments. All the places where the earthworms used to live, it's all being, torn away.
Wow. This is so interesting. Okay. So the impacts, you can apply this right from the very beginning, and do you keep applying it through I mean, are you feeding the roots of a fully grown plant with this as well?
Oh yeah, trees even. We've used this on like bushes and orchids and roses and everything.
So why aren't I just spraying this stuff all over my lawn every spring?
Why aren't you? I mean, you ought
Probably
to be.
because it's not carried at Ace, I suppose.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, we do have like one Ace store carrying it, but I'd love to see the rest of them doing it.
It's probably not in Middle Valley, Tennessee, though.
No, not yet. But it's an interesting thing because it's sterilized in a way that makes it shelf stable, but we do add hibernating microbes back into it. So it's good for applying to crops throughout the growing season, but it also just strengthens the soil in the long run too, because it's adding back in a lot of the microbes that should have been there in the first place.
So are you fortifying this stuff with like the zinc and the copper and the iron and so on and so forth that the plants need as well? Or is that just naturally in there through the worm poop?
It's pretty much just naturally there from the worm manure.
So what are you feeding these worms? I mean, do you have a big bucket in your mom's garage with a bunch of worms in it? You throw cabbage in there and some stuff? And
I used to.
Yeah, I bet you did. I don't doubt that at all.
When I first started, I had an 8-foot bin in the back. Actually, I still have it. I've just not used it for anything. But I had a big 8-foot bin in my backyard, and I had them all in there just eating different things. But eventually I started working with from worm farmers. So there are people whose entire business is to farm worms.
Yeah.
And I found a few of them. I talked to them and I said, hey, can you feed the worms this, this, and this? Kind of set up a diet for their worms. And we worked together to figure out like, okay, is this the right consistency? Is it coming out with the right nutrients? Eventually we get that. And then we start buying the castings from them in bulk to make our product. And so we have the worm diet, but we don't actually grow the worms ourselves anymore. We now have people whose entire, job is just do that.
Okay, so you've created a new industry of worm castings.
I mean, a new element to it, because there are the guys who've been doing that for decades.
They've been doing it anyways, but you've got a special blend of feed. You want them to feed the worms. Right. Is that right?
Yeah, and the other part of it too.
So let's talk about that feed. What is that feed? Is there benefits to that feed? Because when you talk about this, I'm like, okay, one of the biggest problem in waste is, I mean. Well, by volume, the biggest problem in waste is the bio waste. And I don't mean, like for, in the sewage. I mean, the biomaterials, the food waste, et cetera, right? Biomass in going into landfills, et cetera. The amount of it, and then, its ability to create methane, which is far worse than carbon. As a GHG. So is this a can you divert that biomass towards this or?
Absolutely. Yeah. In fact, I think that's one of the really underappreciated elements of worm farming is that it allows you to take, a lot of this food waste that you said might become methane essentially, by anaerobic digestion in a landfill. Yeah. And just redirect it so that instead it's going to earthworms. And
which then doesn't produce the methane.
No, they produce.
If you break it down in certain ways, it doesn't have to produce that methane.
No, it only produces methane when it is basically not exposed to oxygen. When you put it under enough material, anaerobic microbes get into it, and they're the ones that poop out methane.
Okay, that's what it is. All right, yes. I got you. So once it gets buried into the landfill, which theoretically was what, not theoretically, that's like the goal.
Yeah. Yeah. When you bury
that's wrong.
I mean, if you want an example, just go and look at like a swamp or like a really, like old lake. You get swamp gas coming out of it, methane. And the reason is because all the dead like leaf litter and stuff drops into the lake, sinks to the bottom, and when it sinks, it doesn't have oxygen around it. It doesn't have access to oxygen. So the only microbes that can digest it are anaerobic microbes. And so they build up supplies of methane underneath the lake, and that's how you get swamp gas.
Oh, wow. Okay. And then UFO sightings and then mass hysteria and the whole thing.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
I mean, it's a vicious cycle, my friend.
It is. That's how you end up in the Bermuda Triangle, and
all that crap happens. Skunk apes and all kinds of things start happening.
But if you have worms, you don't get that because
you can eliminate the skunk ape and everything.
Get the skunk ape gone. All your magnetic navigation equipment still works.
That's right.
So you're eliminating the anaerobic component of it because the worms are aerobes. They breathe oxygen and they want access to air. So you end up getting, uh, less methane production, which is nice because methane is like 270 times worse than CO2.
Yeah, it's awful. It's awful. I mean, it's shorter lived, but it's much more impactful on global warming
Yeah, I mean,
in
it
the
has a
atmosphere.
90-year lifespan in the atmosphere, I think. So it's still a
Which
long
is long,
time.
and it's still a long time, but relative to GH or to
The
CO2, it's
CO2, which
not.
is like 20,000 years or something. Yeah.
Yeah. 90 years still sucks.
It still sucks. Yeah, I wouldn't want to wait 90 years for something.
No, no.
But, that's one of the benefits of it. The other benefit of it that's really interesting is some worms can actually digest plastics. They can actually eat things like polystyrene and other compounds, nylon.
I saw a video of that of they were eating the white cubes
Yep.
of
Styrofoam.
polystyrene. That's
Yep.
exactly right. And what are the castings? What's the poop from that? What is that useful in any way, or is that just like you know nasty or polystyrene?
So we actually, this is another big part of our business. We actually submitted a grant to the National Science Foundation a year and a half back about using worms to eat plastic waste to make fertilizer. They
Okay.
approved it and they gave us $275,000 to
Wow.
pursue that. And we did a whole like battery of tests to figure out one, can we use worms to eat this plastic at any effective rate? And two, can we use them to make fertilizer out of it? And what we ended up finding out is the poop they produce is not very good. It's really just got carbon in it, and not a lot else because it's they're making it from plastic, but they
Mm,
are fully digesting it. It's not like it's just pooping out solid chunks of microplastics or whatever. They are
right.
actually digesting it. So then what we figured out is, well, if you can isolate the microbe from their gut, you can create a bioreactor, which is really just like a big, jar or chamber that has those microbes in it that will digest the plastic much faster and much cleaner than the worm will. Doesn't leave behind any kind of microplastic
Yeah.
residue.
Gotcha.
And the output of that bioreactor is a biodegradable material which you can mix into the feed of earthworms. And they'll eat that like they eat any other food, which means you can take plastic and in about 5 weeks of processing, turn it into worm castings. Um,
That have nutrient value as
yes,
fertilizer.
that actually do have some nutrient value and can actually be
Now
used
you
as
said there
fertilizer.
was carbon as an off put from this. Is that
Yeah,
right?
there's CO2 that comes out because they're animals, so they're respirating. But
Yeah.
it's not a whole lot. And the other thing is because you're making fertilizer out of it, what do you grow with that fertilizer? You grow plants. The plants are then going to absorb CO2 to build their biomass. So if you're doing this on a large enough scale and you're turning it into fertilizer, it's a cyclical thing. You're not really generating any new CO2 or very little new CO2 because you're
Hmm.
facilitating the growth of crops that then absorb that CO2.
Got you.
So from a
Got you.
climate perspective, it is far better for the environment than something like, the Haber-Bosch process or phosphorus mining. It's way, way better.
Yeah, and you're already using pre-extracted materials, which is the goal, right?
Exactly.
Is to not continue to extract, but use what's already been extracted as much as possible.
And because the worms are destroying plastic waste by this process, you can use, the mountains of plastic that we've got around as essentially a domestic resource to make fertilizer.
Yeah, but you're not. I mean, yeah, but we're not talking about taking the 380,000 tons of wind turbine blades that are going to go into landfill this year and turn them into fertilizer.
Possibly
I
you
mean,
could.
well,
You
I mean,
could.
there's fiberglass in there and all kinds of stuff, right? I mean,
Well, there is.
what? I mean, what different polymers will they eat? I mean, polystyrene is a polymer,
Yeah,
right?
there are many, many kinds of. So they're not going to eat like PVC. Like PVC is
Right.
like,
That's my guess. I mean, are they
yeah,
going to eat like HDPE frac melt?
yeah. Actually, they might. So
Or yeah. Well, I mean, and that's my question, right?
yeah,
I'm not saying they won't. I'm saying because there's when you just talk about PET, well,
yeah. PET is a good
there's a
example.
whole bunch of different types of PET, right? It
Oh
isn't
yeah.
just PET for a bottle. There's PETG and
Oh yeah.
so on and so forth.
But generally, most of these polymers that we use in our day-to-day plastics, whether it's
Okay.
HDPE, PET, whatever, they
Yeah.
tend to break down when you thermally process them into the same kind of set of aromatic
So
compounds.
they'll eat like olefins. So it
Yes.
doesn't matter.
Yes. So they're going to
Right?
eat things like benzoic acid, they're going to eat things like toluene, like styrene, like furfural. So if you have a PET and you pyrolyze it or you thermally crack it in some way, you'll get these
Yeah.
compounds out. You can feed those into your bioreactor. Your bioreactor, if it's got the right microbes in it from the worm gut and you're kind of, dripping it in the right way, they'll eat it and they'll digest it. And so at the end of that process, you end up with a whole mixture of organic outputs, but they're all biodegradable. It's phenylacetic acid, it's polyhydroxyl alkanoates, it's all kinds of stuff that ultimately is just basically mixed poop. And if you're not that interested in getting a specific output, then you can do this quite fast, and you get a lot of different outputs. But if they're all digestible, then all you need to do is feed them to something that can digest them, like a worm. And you take them. What we do is we actually make a Jello out of them with agar. We make it like a jam, and we take that Jello and we dump that into a worm bed, and they eat it in the worm bed.
Oh, okay. I was going to say, and we take that to parties and watch.
And we give it to people, and we say, "Hey, what does this taste like?
Delicious, isn't it?"
That's that was a plastic bottle.
So,
they eat it.
Is the possibility here that I could have like a Mr. Worm casting in my backyard? Just throw all my plastic in there.
Well, that's probably a ways away, but.
Couple weeks away. You guys working on?
Probably a couple decades, I would think, for that.
I got you.
Maybe a decade or two.
I'm just thinking of through the technology. All this is theoretical, right? I mean, you haven't put any of this actually together, but when you do the math and the chemistry, this should work.
We have actually done this.
Okay.
We have actually taken plastic and we have thermally broken it down on a desktop scale. So we're talking like a few pounds. And we have actually broken this into, food for the bioreactors. They've digested it, and we've made worm castings out of it. And we've grown plants in those worm castings. And they grow like any other plant. So it isn't just theoretical. We have actually done it.
It's crazy because, you're talking about these polymers that were created from fossil fuel.
Yeah.
Really, basically. Fossil or from oil,
exactly. Yeah.
They're petrochemicals and now you're breaking them down into a food so this is like you're breaking them down in steps, right? So you're heating it down, and then you're doing the bioreactive, or your what did you call it? Your bioreactor.
Yeah, it's a bioreactor. Yeah, so it's
your bioreactor, which is the worm eating it and turning it into a casting, right? And then you're growing plants into it with it, which is then another form of breaking this down, right?
Yes.
At what point of those do we now say, okay, look, the harmful forever chemicals that might have been used in this are now inert? When does it become this inert substance that you just say, okay, look, it's fixed?
Pretty much.
Is that at the casting level? Is it at the?
Actually, it's really the step before that. So step one is you thermally process it into like a liquid or something that can go into the bioreactor. Right. The bioreactor is really what's taking it from the plastic, from the toxin, and taking it apart and turning it into something biodegradable. That's
bioreactor.
Yes,
is doing that. Yeah. Okay, that's what I'm saying. Is where does that occur?
So at that point, you have a biodegradable material you could just throw out in the dirt and it will break apart. I've actually had mold grow on it when I've left it out. And at that point,
the mold was like toxic.
Well, I wouldn't eat the mold. Yeah, but the worms will. They love mold. Mold's one of their favorite things.
Yeah, which is fantastic because I lived in South Florida and mold's an issue sometimes.
Oh, it is, yeah. But at that point, you no longer have a toxin, really. At that point, you have a biodegradable substance. And so from there, you can turn it into worm castings, or you could do other things with it. But that's what we've been doing, is turn it into worm castings, because it's a straightforward and relatively easy way to do it at scale. And you get a fertilizer out of it, which is valuable.
And what's the impact on the worms? Is PETA going to get mad at you because you're killing worms with this plastic stuff, or does it impact the worm population in some way? Because I saw studies actually where there was and I forget where it is, but there's a study out there, and I have it somewhere hidden in my computer with a million other useless things, because my intellectual curiosity keeps me going in crazy different directions. But there was a study that showed that actual these natural fibers introduced to the soil hurt the earthworms more than polymers.
Yes. Yes. And
it was like 11% difference in population.
Yeah. I mean, because polymers of any kind are difficult to digest. They're difficult to deal with. So they can choke, they can build up, they can, cause physical damage. But at the point where we are actually feeding this to worms, it's being fed to them as essentially a depolymerized slurry of poop. So the microbes have already broken the polymers down. So what they're getting is a bunch of organic acids in a jello, which they're going to chew through like any other kind of food that they encounter.
Okay.
And we've found that, I mean, preliminarily at least, we haven't found the worms have had any problem with that. They seem to be totally fine with it. Now, we haven't done this at a large enough scale yet to be, know exactly what's happening each step of the process. And we're not making commercial fertilizer from plastic yet. That's still a ways away.
Yeah.
But we've done enough to see that, at least so far, the signs look really good. It looks like
there's reason to take it to the next step and study more.
Precisely. And that's really exciting, because with these plastics, normally they take 800 years, 500 years to break down. And when they break down, most of what they break down into is just more micro and nanoplastics.
Yeah, so, it's not like they break down into a slice of cheese.
No, they're not turning into.
It's a smaller piece of a plastic bag.
Yeah, and that's like, okay, it's still there. You didn't get rid of it.
Yeah, you didn't. It's just now in a million pieces.
Yeah, but in this case, we are actually taking it apart at a chemical level. Molecularly.
Yeah, and that's true degradable. That's truly what needs to happen.
Exactly, and in my opinion, that's more important than like recycling or reusing or anything like that. It's just getting rid of it, just deleting it as much as possible.
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, I'm into the recycling end of it, and I realize that is really
it's like a stopgap.
It's a stopgap. It's kicking the can down the road. It's also the space that I play in is an area that is from your hand, like the plastic microphone in your hand, to the worm farm.
Yeah,
that's my piece of it, of the supply chain. Is how do we do that? Because you can solve for the chemical breakdown of plastics into oxygen, whatever you can imagine the most beneficial outcome is. If you can't collect it from the people and get it to that process, it doesn't mean anything.
Exactly. One of the things that I'd really like to do that's on this topic is I'd really like to take the worms, or the microbes rather, and isolate from them the enzymes that are actually taking apart these polymers. And I'd like to breed and mass produce those enzymes, because then I could go to a landfill. I could go somewhere where the plastic waste is, and I could dump the enzyme essentially onto the field and have the plastic degenerate there on the spot in situ.
Exactly. Exactly. If you can go to the source and process it, that's huge.
That's what I'd love to be able to do. Now that's also a long way out, but the fact that it can be done in a bioreactor shows that it could, in theory, be done anywhere.
Well, and the thing is, now you already have the infrastructure to take. If you were to say, okay, look, anything you throw out, put it in this bin, we'll come pick it up. That already exists. It's efficient as hell, right? And it's part of the problem that we have is that it's that efficient, right?
Really efficient.
So it's really efficient. So just turn the landfills into bioreactors.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. But it's kind of a challenge. Like, okay, who do we talk to actually bring this to them? How do we get funding to actually scale this? Because this whole business we've done with the worms, all of it has been bootstrapped. We've never taken on any debt. We've never had any investors. It's just been me and the guys, selling product, reinvesting the money we make from selling it, and just at nauseum. So it's like, okay, if you really want to address plastic, though, you got to have a, not just a couple $1 million behind you. You might need like a couple $1 billion behind you to get the scale necessary to really tackle that problem. And that's
you do. You absolutely do. And the issue, I think, and it's not a nefarious thing. It's just facts of life.
Yeah.
Most of the people that are interested in this and that are in recycling the plastics are those that are utilizing plastics, and therefore they're trying to make it circular, not go away.
No, because they're invested.
Necessarily.
That's just part of how it works.
Exactly. Your big chemical companies, your Dows, your Lyondell Bessels, your P&Gs, they're all investing in this type of thing. But it's to get those polymers back to then make more. It's not to feed plants, right?
Yeah.
And so that's, you know,
Whereas in
I'm
our
sure I'm sure they'd be interested in doing that type of stuff, right? But
yeah.
it's not right now. Their goal is to accommodate EU mandates and foreign mandates and potential US mandates for
because
VCR
they make a
content.
killing off of it, and they don't want to stop.
Well, and
doing
they
it.
also they have to comply. They got to have a certain amount of post consumer content.
Yeah, absolutely.
You just do.
I mean, and
Yeah,
honestly, it's one of those things. Like if you go to Sweden, for example, you'll find a lot of the plastic waste just gets incinerated. They just burn it for fuel.
that's right.
And I
That's right.
honestly don't see why we haven't done that more in the U.S. I mean, we have huge energy demands, especially around like AI and stuff these days. It's pretty easy to burn plastic. You can do it in your backyard. It makes a lot
It
of
doesn't smell good though.
It doesn't smell good. No, I
It's
wouldn't recommend it.
nasty.
But it
No.
is doable. But we don't want to do that really either.
Well, the VOCs are pretty nasty.
They are, but there are technologies that have been developed to collect a lot of that. To
Well, you
purify
can
a lot
you
of
got
that.
scrubbers and stuff like that can
Yeah.
do that type of thing.
So,
But
but
it's not sexy. It's just what, dude, we shut down flaring,
yeah,
which was ridiculous
That
because
was
flaring
strange.
is so much better than just leaking methane into the atmosphere.
but it
It's
looks
so much
bad.
better.
It
looks
bad.
bad. Exactly.
People don't want to see a big torch going into the sky.
They don't.
Even though the invisible one is way worse.
It's way worse. It just
but
doesn't
it's-
look as bad.
No, it's the same thing. But with our process, we could be taking this plastic and we could be destroying it and turning it into dirt and castings and all this kind of thing. But that's not as sexy, and so maybe it will take a lot more time for us to pitch that.
It isn't as sexy, but there are massive, 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 as you know,
Yeah.
corporations that make a lot of money off of agriculture.
Oh yeah.
The ConAgras of the world and so on.
Cargill and stuff. Yeah, and I'd love to talk to them.
Yeah,
Maybe
that would you just got to get in front of the right person.
Yeah, well, that's part of being on shows like this, so I can kind of get the word out there.
Yeah. Well, I mean, hopefully we can do that. That's why I do this. I didn't wake up and say, God, I can't wait to promote WriggleBrew. But it is the entrepreneurs like yourself and the thought leaders, really, and you are like yourself that look to these and look for these solutions and then go for it. It's incredibly important, and
Well, thank you.
it's incredibly important that those that have the wherewithal to fund and to hope or to fund and to help and advance what you're trying to do, hear it.
Yeah.
Because we have all this new technology, et cetera, which is another passion of mine to be able to reach out to each other, which has only created thicker, wider, deeper moats around those that can help you move forward and advance new technologies and nascent ideas. It just made those moats bigger and more effective because the noise hitting them is much more. And so I can tell you, with the advancement of a lot of our communication technologies, et cetera, our actual ability to communicate ideas and advance is degrading.
Yeah,
because the noise coming through is so intense at times.
It's overwhelming. It's like electronic warfare. It's interference, jamming, and
yeah, it is. It is. Where 30 years ago or something, you might have been able to pick up the phone and talk to Cargill.
Yeah, I can't do it.
You can't do it today.
I've tried stuff like that. I have tried.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I'm sure.
You get nowhere, and it's the same thing in academia. Like you try and talk to a professor today, you can't. I mean, forget about office hours. You can't even talk to them because they're like, "Oh, send me an email," and then they ghost your email. If you want to do business with somebody, it's so difficult to actually bridge that gap.
Yeah, it's really hard, and it is, in my estimation, because of. It's just like information, dude.
Yeah.
Back in the day, there was this, and I could go on, and I'd sound like, I walked to school uphill both ways and snow, all that bullshit. But it's 100% true. The more we're connected, the more you can't trust information.
Well, anybody look at like all the AI emails you get these days. Like I'm sure you probably get them all the time.
Oh yeah.
You get like ChatGPT written emails all the time, and they all kind of have the same verbiage to them, but you get spammed with them, and you end up deleting all of them because it's like, this is not real. There's not a human being on the other end of this, or maybe there was, but he set this up to send to 1,000 people. It's really it's destructive in a way, because now you can't sort out who's a real human being and who isn't. Because you go, okay, was this just a well-written, nice email from a person, or is this another?
Usually when I email somebody, they know it's from me because I misspell like half the words. And not because I can't spell, it's because I type so fast that it comes out inside out and stuff like that. So
wait till we get an AI that learns to mimic that.
Mimic the mistake. I will.
It's a scary topic. Something I'm worried about is, like, and this is not related to our topic at all, but it would be really easy to have an AI write a textbook that looks like it's written in like 1936. Put black and white photos in it, backdate it, load it onto some archive somewhere, and then cite that to make some claim for something on like Wikipedia that then everyone's going to source. And no one's going to know that the book that it comes from that you find on Google Scholar isn't real.
Yeah, that's why I just don't believe anything.
Yes, which is fair enough.
It's better. It's easier.
What was there was a famous phrase. It was something, trust but verify.
Absolutely. Trust but verify is incredibly important. I love what you guys are doing, dude. And I love the initiative. And this is exactly what the Sustainiacs is about, is giving a platform for something like what you guys are doing. It's really cool. I ran across a guy he's using castings is the worm poop, and I get it, because I'm picturing the trails of poop that come out, right? And it's like a plaster casting. That's what it is, kind of. I get it, but he's using and I forget what he called it, but it's the shed, the skin shed from the larva of black soldier flies.
Yeah, insect frass. That stuff's great.
Yeah. He's doing a whole bunch of farming of that stuff down in Mexico.
That's really cool.
Black
soldier fly larvae can also eat some kinds of plastics.
He was on the show a bit back, like a couple months ago. Yeah, I mean, he wasn't into business whatsoever. He's just in Thailand walking down the street with some girl he was trying to impress and to say, you know what, I'll eat that insect. Oh. And from there, it's just like, wow, okay, this was not all that bad, a deep fried cricket.
I wouldn't eat it, though.
Yeah. Anyways, he went from human food to, agricultural feed and that type of stuff. Anyways.
It's great food for chickens. Yeah, I'd love to feed it to a chicken, but I don't want to eat it myself. But it's a wonderful way to get rid of like food waste, because black soldier fly larvae will eat anything, and they don't.
That's exactly it. And that's where I was going with you. Is like these worms. It's a great way to get rid of food waste, right? Yeah.
And we're working with farms right now, and other people who have food waste. Like corn husks, and like spent brewery grains, like all this kind of stuff. There's tons of it. There's mountains of it. We're getting more all the time.
A bunch of drunk worms running around.
Yeah, I mean a little bit.
Yeah.
The worm only has 502 neurons to it. So
there's not a lot. Like my daughter the other day, I don't know why she asked me, do worms have brains? I said, no, there's ganglion, but that's about it.
Yeah, I mean, calling it a brain is frankly an insult to the rest of us.
It's not. Yeah, it's not like it is making like conscious decisions.
No, in fact, if you stimulate an earthworm's brain on a computer, the simulation will behave exactly like the worm does. Same movements, like everything.
Yeah,
it's kind of crazy, and that's the thing that's interesting, is that it's only 502 neurons, but that's all it needs.
That's it's. Yeah, I mean, if you don't understand that, then you don't understand that. But I do understand that, and it is
kind of like amazing. A lot of our politicians. Like, it's surprising what can get done without a brain.
Well, but you see, the what you have to take out of that argument is that's all it needs. This is not all it needs. They operate on that, but they need far more.
It's true. I mean, they seem to make it through, but
Exactly. Well, that's an AI simulation.
That's right. Yeah.
We are way off topic, brother. Who needs to reach out to you, and how do they do that?
So a lot of people need to reach out to me.
That's what I'm thinking. You want to categorize them real quick?
Sure. If you're a gardener and you want our product, you should go to our website. Yeah. You could also go to our Amazon. You should look for WriggleBrew, WRIGGLEBREW. If you're interested in learning more about our science, you can email me. My contact is also on the website. If you are someone who is potentially interested in the industrial application or the farm application, I also encourage you to email me. Really, just a general email me if you have questions or you're interested about worms being used to eat plastic, make fertilization easier, or you want to improve your soil. Because I love to talk about worms if that doesn't come across.
I love worms. Dumb and Dumber, right? Their store was going to be I Got Worms.
I mean, maybe I should make one of those. Make a little.
They were going to start a worm farm store and sell worm farms, right? And they were going to call it I Got Worms. Listen, dude, reach out to this guy, Samuel Baker. He's the man, dude.
You just call me Sam. Sam, I am.
Just call him Sam, I am. I will not eat that ham, Sam, I am. Fantastic stuff, Roy. I really appreciate it. Everybody, hey, thank you for downloading and listening to the Sustainiacs. I'm Mike Vincent. He's Sam Baker. Check out WriggleBrew. It's cool stuff, but don't drink it, man.
Don't drink
it. I mean, it probably won't kill you, but it's not good. Peace and love, everybody. Peace and love.